Welcome to a live episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And we were delayed by a moment or two because every once in a while when you're doing a live show, one of your three guests bails out in the last couple of seconds, which throws everything for a loop. Not saying that happened to us, but maybe it just did, because we're supposed to have three best guests, but we only have two best guests. But since they are best guests, we're going to make the best of it, and we will have a dandy old time with this show and talking Donna Adelson. Hard to believe. Megan was on recently. I'm about to introduce you to Jessica, but it is really hard to believe that, it feels like yesterday that we were breaking news live on Surviving the Survivor about Donna Adelson's imminent arrest. That was the night of November 13th, 2023. She was, in fact, arrested. And now, just like that, basically a year has passed, or 9+ months. We are 3 weeks away from the murder trial of Donna Sue Adelson. She is, of course, charged with first-degree murder and the conspiracy to kill her ex-son-in-law, FSU law professor Dan Markel, who was a rising legal scholar. Tonight, we were going to really talk a lot to the judge. It's interesting because we always hear from lawyers, and we hear from, criminal profilers and people of this nature. Rarely do you hear from a judge. So I'm going to switch gears tomorrow night, and we'll get hopefully a lot of substantive answers from Judge Jay Blitzman, who's an elder statesman of STS, and hopefully he can answer some of those. But tonight, we've got for you Megan Sachs, bottom of your screen. She's a full professor of criminology and the graduate program director at Fairleigh Dickinson University in my home state of New Jersey. She teaches classes including women in crime, serial killers, and crime policy. Notice women and crime. So we will ask Megan about Donna's profile, essentially, if she fits the bill for the crime she's being about to stand trial for. Megan and her cohort, Amy, co-host two podcasts, Women in Crime and Direct Appeal, Women in Crime and Direct Appeal. Meanwhile, we're also joined by Jessica Mishali. She has her own law office in Boca Raton. She started her own practice after about a decade of representing the indigent and took over the family practice from former state rep Stephen Press in 2018. She has successfully handled many high-profile cases, most recently Marsha Thompson, and not guilty verdict last month on a first-degree murder case that I know is down here. I don't know much about it, but it was fairly high-profile. There's sadly so many cases, it's hard to keep up with. And she's been a regular on Court TV. So we welcome to the show Jessica Mishali. Jessica, sorry it's on a night where we're missing one of the three guests, but the good thing for you is you're going to get that much more airtime. So Jessica, to you first, and this is a question I've been asking all along, but I'd love to get different perspective. You're on the defense side here. You've got Donna Sue Adelson, 73. She might be 74 now. I'm not 100% sure. But she's going on trial in 3 weeks. I have texted back and forth with Dan Rashbaum, so I have a little insight into this. Let's put it this way. He's working nonstop. What are some of the things that he's doing right now in his day-to-day?
Probably stressing a lot, I would say, with this particular defendant. I mean, just coming off this, like you mentioned, the Marsha Thompson, but just being in a first-degree murder trial, representing someone, I don't know how he feels about his client, but he certainly wants to do the best job possible. And if he has any feelings about
I can answer that, actually, because it's interesting you asked. So he did a one-on-one interview with me. I think it's the only full-length one-on-one that he's done, if I'm correct about that. But he says that he has a very, very good relationship with Donna. they've known each other for a bunch of years, and he is convinced of her innocence. So he's not just representing her, it's a typical criminal defense attorney, not asking questions. He's said publicly that he's absolutely convinced of her innocence, despite your smirk.
So, I'll give you the criminal defense attorney. It's my first time on your show, but I'll just be real because I always am. I don't think that means much, right? How he really feels about her is not something he's going to be able to say on your show if it's not positive, because it goes along with her defense, right? So he kind of has to say that. It's part of being her attorney. He actually isn't even at liberty to say anything negative about her at this time based on his ethical obligations to her. So we don't really know how he feels, but it's getting a lot of media attention at the very least, and he certainly cares about the job that he's doing. So I would say he's stressing. I would say he's just sort of thinking of what he can do. And you mentioned right away her age, and I think that is certainly something for him to harp on, right? If nothing else, grab at sympathy, right? If you ever can. So you pull at what you can pull at in a case. You look at anything, and I think that in this particular case, even given her age, it doesn't seem to me like she's particularly liked, right? She's not particularly sympathetic or liked, but that can change, right? That can change based on how she's prepared by her attorney. And I'm sure he'll do an excellent job.
Black Widow comes to us from the Republic of Ireland. Always an interesting human. I actually love her. She's always here. Jesus, I thought Joel was topless for a second. No, it's just a non-black shirt. However, I will say this: I'm working out like a madman. It's the only thing that helps me with stress. So I make it a point to go to the gym every day, and I will be doing the show topless. Give me 6 more months, and then I'll be doing the show. I'll be the only true crime topless show host in America, but it'll be worth it.
Corner of the market.
There we go. Still trying to figure out these boxes. So, I just did something wrong. There we go. The COE is helping me out there. We're going to get into also Megan's expertise, which is, criminology, criminal behavior, criminal profiling. But there was a lot of talk today. Fancy fiction. She obviously breaks a lot of news in this case. She's going to be there for the trial, as she was for Charlie Adelson. She put out a court document that mentioned courtroom 3B for the September 12th hearing, which is interesting because if you're following the case, you know that there was a pretrial motion from Dan Rashbaum. He actually wants to move the entire trial to the smaller courtroom. So very quickly, this is a layout. This is the Leon County Courthouse, the exterior, the interior is a rotunda, and this is 3G. 3G has got a pretty big gallery. This is taken during the Charlie Adelson trial. It looks like Dan Rashbaum and Charlie are in love there. Look at that body language. And there is, if you look in the second row behind Sarah Dugan, you'll see Ruth Markel leaning over, speaking to Phil Markel. And I think that's yours truly right behind her, tweeting out information. So the reason I bring this up, Megan, there was this motion file to move to the smaller courtroom into 3B. I was obviously going to ask the judge about this, and I will tomorrow about, sort of the importance of this. But what is your read on this? I mean, he's doing it because he claims that there's too much interference. There's too many distractions. You think he's going to win this motion? This motion the judge has not ruled on this yet.
I don't know if he's going to win, but I totally understand the motion. I mean, they wanted a little bit more intimate, right? It's only beneficial to Donna to have that. I think they're trying to avoid all the huge influence, the gasps, the shock that, the huge audience that's going to impact the jury. So, I think it's a smart motion. Are they going to win? I don't know. We'll see. What I mean is I certainly understand. It's a good move for sure.
Yeah. And this is the actual document. We have since gotten it, but Fancy posted this first today. Notice of pretrial case management. Jessica, this is obviously just a straightforward legal document. You see the charges: murder, first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, first degree for Donna Sue Adelson, her Brickell Avenue apartment, et cetera, et cetera. But you see there, where am I looking? It does say courtroom 3B. I'm just not seeing it right now because
In the first sentence, it says that.
Oh, there you go. That's why I didn't
Yeah.
see it. Always in the first sentence. So you see it says courtroom 3B. Now, the COE, being the dogged reporter she is, and if you don't know her, Jessica, she's my wife. She's the chief of everything. She runs the show just like in real life. So she reached out to the Leon County Courthouse, and they told her, look, this is a default system that they have, basically. Whenever they put out a court document, it basically defaults to courtroom 3B. So they told us, don't read into it. The motion has not been ruled on, hasn't been decided. But Jessica, just on a, bigger picture, more macro, would you be doing the same thing, trying to get a smaller courtroom for a high profile case to keep people like myself out, and Fancy Fiction and others who might want to go there and report on it or do YouTube shows on it?
So with regard to the document, it's noticing a pretrial case management. So to me, what it's saying is that the case management is going to be in that particular courtroom. It's not yet making any sort of statement as to where the trial itself will be held. That'll be once the jury is sat and they're ready. So I don't think there's a ruling. I don't know if I would do this. I totally agree with Megan, right? I see why that the attorney wants to do it. But I think also that it's the weaker side who always wants this, right? The stronger side wants as many people in the courtroom as possible, wants it as open as possible, wants as much media as possible. That's kind of where you're going. And the weaker side wants this, right? So I would say if it was my case, what I would be trying to do is fill up the courtroom with supporters as opposed to trying to have a smaller courtroom. I think that would be more of a power play. I think that, I get where he's coming from, and maybe that's something that they're not able to accomplish. I don't know, right? And so if they can't accomplish it, then you go this way. But I think it's a little bit of a weaker move.
And that's interesting. Megan, curious to get your reaction. In the first, well, I should say in Charlie's trial, the most recent trial, the first one that I was at, there was no family there. Wendy testified, but no one else. I mean, there was no Donna, and this was prior to her arrest. There was no Harvey. There was no estranged brother, Rob. I mean, I understand Jessica's point of trying to get support. If you had to guess right now, do you think Harvey shows up for this trial in 3 weeks? People are talking about his health. I mean, he's in his very early 80s. I saw a photo of him recently. He's mobile. He's on 2 legs. You think we're going to see him?
I think we'll see him for Donna's trial. I don't think we're going to see him every day, but I do think we're going to see him. But it's a great point that you bring up. Like Charlie's trial, no one's there. So Jessica's saying, great, let's pack the courtroom with supporters. But where are they? Who are their supporters? If they're not existent, then that's not a very good look at all. I do think we're going to see Harvey for some of Donna's trial, though. I would be very surprised if we didn't see him at all. Yeah, no, I think we'll see him.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think we're going to see him as well. And I think we're going to see Wendy, and I think we might see Charlie almost definitely on the stand. We'll ask Jessica about that. And that is going to be a very intriguing courtroom moment when Charlie takes a stand in front of his mother, if in fact he does. But we'll get Jessica's take on that in a second. I saw from Steve Cohen that Daryl Cohen, a lot of Cohens in the world, he might join. He's an attorney out of Atlanta. He might hop on in a moment, even though we don't really need Daryl, but I love Daryl. So
I love Daryl. Every time I do a show with Daryl, it's like my favorite.
Yeah, Daryl always says it's a definite maybe. He's a really good guy.
Favorite.
I know.
Yes.
I love it. I love it. Daryl, by the way, Daryl Cohen drove, like when we were in Atlanta, an hour and a half because he said he was coming, and I was like, he really didn't have to do that. And he said he's a man of his word. So there you go. And he really is a great guy. Very, very good guy. So Jessica, to you, obviously notice here pretrial case management. We talked about the courtroom issue. This is less than a week The following Monday is when jury selection starts. So what happens at this final case management hearing? What goes on? What can we expect?
So typically very little, unless there are specific motions that are noticed in a case this serious. They're not going to just like spin up important topics and make like willy-nilly decisions, right? So if it's only saying pretrial case management, it's sort of whatever small things are left over before you bring a jury in. It's also a judge giving you like, listen, last chance. Is there anything else you guys want to bring up? I expect you to do it now. I don't want to hear things for the first time when there is 100 panel members sitting outside waiting to come in. This is the sort of the last moment to bring up anything that hasn't been brought up or to get last minute rulings.
Look at this. Daryl Cohen, a real mensch, hopping on last second. Can you hear us, Daryl?
No, not at all.
I love it. It's perfect. So we're Daryl, we're 3 weeks out from Donna Adelson. What is top of mind for you when it comes to imminent trial here?
Well, what's top of mind is I wonder if she has a valid passport, if she could sneak out of jail.
This is why I love Daryl.
Yeah, Daryl's awesome.
Donna needs a good dentist. Oh, that was her son. I forgot. I couldn't remember. Actually, I think it's going to be very interesting. I think the best thing she can do is try to enter a plea and say, hey, I'm sorry, I screwed up. But on the other hand, that's why we have trials, and especially in Florida. And we need a smaller courtroom. I was thinking of Shakespeare's courtroom. I think 2B would have been much better than 3B, actually.
Daryl, you read my mind, because that was my next question to you. We put up a graphic. There was a court document that went out this morning about the preliminary hearing on September 12th, and it lists courtroom 3B. So a lot of people are saying, wow, Rashbaum got what he wanted. Not so fast. The judge has not ruled on the motion yet. But what is all these machinations about going to the smaller courtroom? Is this something that you've been doing this longer than some other people on the panel? Do you see this? Do you see this often? What do you think about the movement to try to get it into a smaller size courtroom?
I think it's very Shakespeare, much ado about nothing. It has nothing to do with the evidence or the lack of evidence. And it's certainly not going to sway the judge who's going to say, yes, there's probable cause and let's move on. I mean, I don't understand lawyers who act like lawyers for no reason. I prefer.
Daryl, by the way, I seriously hope you're not holding that phone. If you are, there's no way I can keep you on the. Whenever you have to bounce, Daryl, you let us know.
I've got about 10 minutes because I've got basketball, but I promised I'd do this, and I'm here.
Are you playing or is someone else playing?
They're laughing at me as I play.
I love it. Is this outdoors or indoors? I need to know.
Indoors, because if it was outdoors, I'd melt.
What were you like 30 years ago on the basketball court, if I may ask?
Ouch.
No comment.
Were you like a player?
30. I didn't play basketball from the time I graduated University of Georgia until about 20 years ago. And so I had about a 30-year layoff, and I'm okay. Defensively, I'm good. Under the boards, I'm good. I can guard myself. I'm so bad as far as offensive. I'm offensively offensive.
I don't want to gloat, but when I played USY basketball, which was the United Synagogue Youth League, I used to brag that I had the best left-handed jump shot. And you could ask all my friends; they will still tell you I would talk a lot of smack on that court, but I wasn't too good. Since you only have 10 minutes, Daryl, I'm coming right back to you on this question. This is an interesting question, and they're starting to come. If you have a question, put in these triple Qs like you see here from Neely. Can Rashbaum, that's Dan Rashbaum, be fined if he allows communication between Donna and Charlie? She goes on, because I was asking the age. She's 74. Someone else said she's 73. I have to look up that birthday. But, Charlie's a former client. Donna's a current client. If they find out that, I don't think he's going to do this. Dan is a pretty upstanding guy. But what is the legal repercussions of this?
Well, the court, meaning the judge, could find him in contempt. And if the judge finds a lawyer, or anyone for that matter, in contempt, they can go ahead and fine them. They can incarcerate them, or they can spank them on the wrist and say, it's a little slap, don't do it again. So there's any number of things a judge can do. And if the judge were to find out that Dan Rashbaum was intentionally violating this confidence in the order, then he would be stronger. If he thought it was just a no big deal, he'd say, hey, don't do it again, please.
Sequestration, Jessica, this is a word, that we hear. We don't see it very often, but again, this is in this particular trial, this is a very relatively small community. I mean, very intelligent community. It is also the entire basis for why this crime happened, because Donna Adelson did not want her little grandchildren growing up in Tallahassee. She preferred Miami, and this is how the hit happened, per all accounts. Is there a chance, or would we already know this, that any last-minute jury sequestration, or possibly during deliberations once we get there?
I would be shocked. Right. I was watching the Sheer show recently, and I was seeing them talk about, changing a venue and things like that. And I think if there was ever a case that I can recall in Florida that should have changed venue, it's this one. Right. The people of Tallahassee, they're so connected to this case. I don't think they're going to find anyone who hasn't heard of it. And so the defense is going to be stuck with people who say, I know everything, but I won't consider it when I'm deliberating for my verdict, right? Those jurors. Right?
Oh, I think you're being kind. I think you're going to have jurors who desperately want to be on that jury, and they're going to say whatever it is that they need to say. I can be fair and impartial. I sort of heard of it. I really didn't. I don't care. I just think people love to be, there are certain people that love to be in the spotlight, and they want to be on that jury and maybe write a book and have a made for TV film if they still do such things.
I agree with you, Daryl.
Yeah, I'm with
Daryl. I think you said it very well. And I think that that's absolutely true. That's what they're going to be stuck with. So, considering they're there, do I think there's going to be sequestration? No. I think if there was, and if there was a motion that had any teeth to it, it definitely would have been heard probably by now. I don't think they're going to sequester the jury. They're going to do the same thing and tell the jurors that they better not read about it, and they better not talk about it, and they better not, think about it when they're not inside the jury room with anybody. But that's pretty much going to be it. And as far as whether or not the jurors are going to listen, I mean, anybody's guess.
And this is a interesting comment to follow up on from Gigi, because I'm learning, doing this, going to law school with all of you, as I do here every night. Don't want to annoy the judge. So Gigi's asking Megan here, isn't the request essentially saying, Judge, we do not feel you can control your courtroom, so we want it moved to a smaller courtroom? Could this backfire potentially on Dan Rashbaum with an annoyed judge?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. I mean, I'm sure Daryl and Jessica could answer that better, but I think that's definitely a possibility. And I do think that there might be that perception. I don't know if it'll backfire. I mean, hey, it is what it is already. So it was just kind of a long shot, I guess. So, right? Like, what's the huge risk? Could it, result in hurt feelings? Possibly. There was something I was going to say though before that. Sorry, about the jury being sequestered, and I'm sure Daryl and Jessica could both speak to this as well. But there's also, as we've learned through research, juror resentment about being sequestered, and jurors coming to a decision one way or the other because they are resentful or angry at one side for being sequestered. So even though I understand why we would probably want, like some of us think, oh my gosh, they should be sequestered in this case, of course, there's also a downside that I think most people don't know about, and a resentment and anger that comes with being sequestered by certain jurors that might impact their decisions as well. So I just want
who do they typically get angry at? At the judge, at the court, at the defendant? Who is it?
It really depends, to be honest. Again, I really think Daryl and Jessica could probably tell you more about this, but it depends on who they perceive also as more unlikable, because I know the body of research on jury likability, and what they're talking about is who they like, who do they dislike, And so if it's that they dislike the defense attorney, well, oh shit, now they're going to perceive it as the defense attorney's fault. And that might, go against their defendant. So it's really a perception of who they like, they don't like, or how tired they are, what events they have going on in the outside world. There's so many factors that impact it, but I just thought it was important to point out that there is a resentment, a fatigue, and a lot of other factors that come into being sequestered that most people don't really think about.
Daryl, what about that? I mean, in your experience, does it? I mean, it's very rare that they're sequestered, right? I feel like we used to hear about this more often. I don't know why, but to Megan's point, do they kind of begrudge that on the defendant or the defense attorney? What have you found?
I think Megan is 1,000% correct. I think jurors don't want to be sequestered. And of course, we heard about this a lot more before social media was what it is. So now that they really need to be sequestered, keeping them away from all sorts of influences is when they don't want to be. And they're going to be just upset, period. So what do you do to make them less upset? You kowtow to them. Judge says, "Oh, we love you. We love you." You make sure they get great food. They always say, because if you get them just regular, oh my gosh, I don't think that'll work. So they do get upset. They're not going to like someone, and the person or persons they dislike before, they're going to dislike him or her more because it's their fault they're sequestered. Now, the reality is, if they're sequestered, they're more likely to reach a verdict more quickly.
Yeah.
In my view.
Daryl, since you have to hop in a second, I'm going to throw this one to you too, and there's another one behind it. But first off, Susan Hicks, who's a friend of the show and helped us in the past, she lives in Tallahassee. She says, "I know a lot of Tallahassee residents who know nothing about the case." That's interesting. I would think that was not the case, but what do you think, Daryl?
I think that she's probably telling a partial truth. If you don't talk about the case, then you know nothing about the case. Who am I going to vote for? If I don't tell you who I'm voting for, then I know nothing and you know nothing. She's probably telling the truth. And this is unlike with us being in the media. The average person in Tallahassee, this means nothing unless mom's son was their dentist. I just think it's a nothing burger.
Yeah, Angela goes on saying that Tally has over 200,000 people. Many are transient. It's the capital of Florida, so they will find an objective jury. I think that they will find an objective jury as well. Daryl, before you go and play hoops, the question is, and I'm going to pose this to the two women guests at the end, but from you, is Wendy next? I know I've asked you this before. It's a question everyone wants answered. You know all the answers, Daryl. What is the answer? Definite maybe.
That you know me well. It's a definite maybe. As time goes by, the case doesn't unravel, it re-ravels and the spool gets tighter and tighter. We'll just wait and see. Let's make it a soap opera.
There you go.
I'm sorry, I've got to jump. I really
Daryl, we
apologize.
love you. Thanks for hopping on, Daryl. Good luck. Do not break a leg.
No, I'll do my best. And I'll see you in November, but I'll talk to you about that tomorrow.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Have a good night.
Bye, everybody. Bye, Megan.
Bye, Daryl.
Great guy. Love that guy.
Love that he jumped on like a pre-basketball. Like he's in his car getting ready to play basketball. Yeah. He's great.
Yeah. I really like him. Very, very sincere. There he was. He was talking backstage. Rosemary Romero here. To the lawyer, to Jessica. Could the judge, this is an interesting question too, could the judge rule in Donna's favor? You notice the Canadian spelling there, because she is paying for her defense. Could the judge rule, correct me if I'm wrong, but a judge, in other words, she's paying for her. It's not a public defender, but that would have no weight at all in his decision. Correct, Jessica?
It shouldn't. I mean, it shouldn't. And I don't think it would. I don't think it would here.
Look at this. Dr. J is periodontist, a pediatric periodontist, and he went to dental school with Charlie. True story. Look at this, a small world. Charlie was pretty decent at basketball. It was hard to guard him. He had really muscular elbows. Can an elbow be muscular?
I've never heard that.
I was just thinking that. I'm like, what does that even mean?
they're bony, I would say. That made him a beast at blocking out. True story. Jay, could you take him? Please let us know in the comments section. I would like to know. Charlie's a big dude. I have stood not far from him. He's a big guy, like 6'2", and meaty. He's not like lean. He's a thick 6'2". He's a big guy. So speaking of that, I wonder what's going on with him in prison in South Dakota. I have not read this question yet. We'll read it together from Dave H. Can Charlie get a lower sentence if he testifies for the state against his family? Can they lower? I know in Florida, life is life. Jessica, you're the attorney here. Is there any possible plea deal? I've heard other attorneys say no way, but any deal that he could cut at this late hour or during the trial even?
I would say yes.
Really?
Yeah, definitely. And you asked me like kind of early on what I think, Donna's attorney is doing right now. If it was me, I would be looking at the possibility of a deal for myself, for my son, potentially for my daughter, right? For all of it. And so, yes, he's been found guilty. He has life without parole. He's going to spend the next, I don't know how many years in appeals after appeals after appeals, right? Fighting. And at the end of the day, I think the state would cut off some of that time if they had everybody, right? If they had all the people that they think are responsible. I think they would. I think there's a chance for that. And that's what I would do.
This is now Megan's.
Yes.
Yeah.
So also just yes. Don't you
Yeah.
think so? I mean, yeah.
This is moving into Megan's world here a little bit, and that is criminology and how killers think. Behavioral analysis wise, just based on, you being a professor and studying this, what sort of psychological factors do you think influence Donna Adelson's involvement or alleged involvement that she's going to be standing trial for in this crime? And also, like, how would that be presented in a courtroom potentially?
Well, hopefully they won't present that in a courtroom on her side, but
On her right, not on her side.
the prosecution will. I've heard a lot discussed in terms of personality disorders for her. In particular, they're talking about narcissistic personality disorder. She's so narcissistic controlling that is a factor that the prosecution might try to show. Obviously, the defense will want to mitigate that. They don't want anyone to hear narcissism is not a good thing to hear, right? So they're not going to want to hear that. From my own point of view, also, so there's personality disorders, but there's also what, we look at, which is psychological disorders, and we look at sociological, criminological disorders as a group. And I see, I think I talked about this on one of your last shows, a couple of other things going on here, which is Donna's very entitled. I think there's something we call control balance theory going on here, which is when someone has either very little control over their life or way too much power, they commit certain crimes. And I think Donna is just a person who was entitled through power. She had a lot of control as well over her own affairs, as we saw in that handwriting analysis and all the ways she controlled her own details of her life. But I do think that she's someone who just had what we call a power surplus. And so she's almost entitled to do what she did because of the power aspect that she had, which does, by the way, play into, so that's more of a sociological theory that does play into narcissistic personality as well. Now, I'm not diagnosing her, by the way. I would never do that.
I mean, it's interesting because, especially in today's world, I think increasingly people say that they're control freaks because there's just so much going on. I mean, there's social media, there's information every second, there's just so much in your face now,
right?
So people have to naturally control it. My question is, where do you bridge the gap between being a control freak and then literally carrying out or organizing or orchestrating a murder? Because that's just next level.
Well, that's where you probably bridge the gap between control and your personality disorder in terms of lacking empathy, sympathy. I think I talked about as well. I think Donna just perceived the situation as she's doing what she thinks is best. And the only victim here was her family. So she doesn't perceive Dan as a victim. And this is all, according with her alleged crime. She doesn't see him as a person. She saw him as an obstacle. One of the most shocking things in these cases for me is always that they don't see the person as a father. And a father, Dan was, by all accounts, an excellent father who loved and adored his children, wanted to be with them, wanted to be this present father all of the time. And yet there's an absolute disregard to see that. So I think that's where you see actual personality disorder traits and antisocial traits and narcissistic traits and things, people who don't seem to have any regard for others. They have no empathy, sympathy. They don't have these emotional feelings for other people. So that's where you bridge the gap.
This is what fascinates me about true crime. From Lindsay Shea, friend of the show, always here with a cute little pooch in the as the avatar. All the jurors on Charlie's trial never spoke. This is true. Not a single juror has ever come forward from that trial. Not all jurors want to write a book. Jessica, does it surprise you? I mean, does it surprise you that it's been close to a year and not a single juror has spoken publicly about the case?
It does surprise me personally. I am surprised, but I also think, honestly, they're probably scared. And I wouldn't be surprised if we hear from one or two once everyone's been convicted and is finished and serving their time. I mean, I think everything Megan just said is really, really interesting. And I think this case is kind of terrifying, right? To kind of people like us, right? Regular people, professionals. We might have known someone like Dan or been friends with him. And this power, right? This narcissism and this power. I mean, to think my two fields are criminal law and family law. And I deal with cases every day that are messier than their divorce, right? Messier custody battles where people are going for the throat and people are really trying to do difficult things. I mean,
is it true that family court is more dangerous than criminal court? I mean, that's what they say.
They do say that. I mean, we also say that in criminal court, you're dealing with bad people at their best, and in family court, you're dealing with good people at their worst. And there's certainly a truth to it. But I deal with a lot of drama in family court, and to think that this man was killed and taken away from his children forever over basically a relocation case, right? Over basically can I move a few hours away or not with these kids? I mean, it is terrifying. I think that people out there are afraid of these people and these jurors are not going to just jump out publicly right now.
Yeah. I mean, Megan, that's a great point. I mean, this is a murder for hire case. This is a family that likes to control things. It almost sounds, they call her Grandma Gotti, some people, but it almost sounds like a mob family. You think that's part of the reason jurors are staying tight-lipped? They don't want to be a target of the Adelson family.
Absolutely. It's very soon. So when you said, are we surprised that we've never heard from a juror? I thought, well, never yet. I think we will hear from a juror at some point, but I think you need time. And yes, I think there's absolute truth to waiting for a conviction. It's very terrifying to be part of, if you think about it, part of a process and on a jury where there's a defendant who possibly has any type of influence or reach. I think there's a fear. Now think about it. If you're on that jury and you realize this is a potential crime family, like we're talking about a crime family here. What's the reach? How far will these people go? Have they stopped? How desperate are they? So I think the fear or the caution is perfectly normal, but I don't think it means we will never hear from them. Although let me just say that I say that as someone who, as you pointed out, my first podcast, Direct Appeal, investigated a conviction of Melanie McGuire in New Jersey for the murder of her husband. And 18 years later, not one of the jurors has ever spoken out. And when we contacted them, one of the jurors said, "We will never speak," and hung up. And I went, wow, they've made some type of pact. They've decided they're never going to speak. And 18 years later, I kind of believe them.
Wow. Yeah. 18 years later, I'm taking their word for sure.
I'm taking their word for it as well. And for whatever their reasons, I respect it. But I don't think that's necessarily the case with Charlie Adelson. I just think it's too soon right now.
Steve Cohn, please get me all 18 jurors from the Charlie Adelson trial, including alternates, by tomorrow. Thank you.
Done.
Yeah. Jennifer Love, not to be confused with Jennifer Love Hewitt, unless she's watching STS. You never know.
Yeah.
I think she has two ends. Who knows? Are there any hurdles, Jessica, that you see that the state has to overcome, or is this a slam dunk? So much of the focus is on the defense here. People are very enamored with Georgia Kappelman and Sarah Dugan, Jack Campbell, who's running the show there. George is a pit bull, no doubt, very competitive, but are there things that they need to be concerned about? What would you say is the number one or two biggest concerns of the state?
So I think it's a slam dunk for the state, honestly. That's what I see this case as, right? But I would say that sometimes the stars align in a different way, right? So if they could actually get a jury that is completely impartial, meaning they don't know and they don't have any prejudgments at all. And if the defendant could show up a little bit differently, right? As this elderly woman who, as opposed to being a narcissist, is an overly loving and protective mother, right? Who would do anything for her children, who is the most loyal mother in the world, who would set herself on fire to help them, right? And that if they could see her from that manner, and especially giving her age, I think that could help a little bit. Do I think it could come a not guilty verdict? Probably not, which is why I think they should negotiate a deal, right? They should use that to their advantage. But I think that could be something that the defense attorney could do to kind of give them a little bit more of a chance, and the state should look out for that.
Can I add to that, Joel?
Yeah, please.
That was so awesome, Jessica. Like, obviously she's the legal expert here, but I just want to say that when we talk about jury research and what jurors like and dislike, Donna has, in some of the pictures, you see older pictures of her, maybe, but not very old. Her hair is still blonde. She still has these stylish glasses on. She kind of looks as if, a certain way. And if she shows up, she's also very tiny. She shows up looking much older, frailer, not so stylish anymore. Her hair isn't done. I actually think that's one of their best sort of weapons of defense there.
You think we're going to see like the pencil in the bun, hair up
No.
in the bun?
No, I think
nothing.
what they would have is like either glasses that are not so stylish, and like her hair won't be done anymore. It'll probably be like a natural color, maybe, you know what I mean? Like maybe gray or white tied back, maybe a little more straggly looking. She's again, instead of being thin, like they are going to present her as someone who's frail. And while I don't think that's going to equal an acquittal, I think it helps. And every little bit helps at this point.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've said it before. She's pretty spry. Like she's in pretty good shape. John Singer famously said she wouldn't make it to trial because she would die, and I said not so fast,
No.
Mr. Singer. And she seems to be doing pretty well. I mean, just to elaborate on that point a little bit, Jessica. I mean, how do you advise your clients, specifically female clients, criminal defendants, to quote unquote look like during trial?
So of course it depends on the defendant and it depends on the case, right?
All right. How about this? What if Donna Adelson was your client?
Was my client. So I would go with something. I fully appreciate what Megan's saying. I agree with it. So my sort of strategy in all my cases is I like to be very real. And I find it brings jurors that relate to me in pretty much every juror trial I've ever done, right? So I don't like to go too far from the truth. So I think I would bring her in sort of plain clothes, plain glasses, not such a drastic difference, but to where it is illustrated, right? That she's older. And honestly, she is becoming more frail with time. Anybody who knows, has friends of people that age or parents of people that age, it's an age where every few years really makes a huge difference, right? And so she is becoming more frail. So it is real. And I would do exactly what Megan was saying. Absolutely.
And she's in jail. So that's going to make jail is debilitating. As we know, there, like I could talk all night about what is debilitating about jail. So yeah, she's more frail because of, as Jessica said, age, but also because of the conditions that she's in.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Although it is weird because we saw her on this Zoom call and she looked pretty good. I mean, unless she's like faking it really well, she looks pretty like strong and healthy, which is, My mom was kind of half jokingly saying that, and very half jokingly saying maybe she's enjoying it in there. Maybe she's got friends. Maybe she's like doesn't have the fear of looking over her shoulder. Kind of these intangibles that have been alleviated, but who knows? The FBI tapes, the so-called, wiretaps and the bump. I heard from Mr. Bumpman, and he's doing well because I mentioned him in the last show. He texted me. He's a good guy, and one of these days we will get him on when he's finally able to speak. But Megan, back to you on this. I mean, this is tangible, visual evidence, stuff that the jurors are going to be able to really like sink their teeth into. They're going to see the bump. They're going to see what happened afterwards with Donna talking to Charlie in code. Is that just a bridge too far for the defense that they can't bridge that gap, and that's going to be what ultimately gets Donna convicted here?
I think so. I mean, I just don't think reasonable people are going to look at this and see a reasonable reaction. I think they're going to see it. Most people are going to see it for what it is. However, you have seen cases where a clever defense attorney can spin this a different way. Oh gosh, what was it? The oil entrepreneur who killed or attempted to kill his ex-wife and did kill his stepchild, Cullen. I forget his last name. It's escaping me right now, but different time. This is the 70s, but had a very clever attorney because he had money and means, who was able to spin, a conversation where he was discussing this crime and what he wanted to do as something completely different. So could a very clever and smart defense attorney like, Donna has put a different spin on these? Yes, but I think it's extremely damning. And I do think it's going to be very hard for most people to escape just the kind of the reasonable, the sniff test, right? They look at this and this doesn't smell right, is what I think most people are going to say.
Yeah. I would have to agree with you on that. And I want to get back to the defense itself. We'll do that in a moment. But Jessica, first from Sheila here. How long do you think this trial will be? I believe Charlie's lasted 8 days. It was pretty quick. Do you see this about equal in time, Jessica, going longer, shorter? What do you say?
I would say it'll be about equal in time. I think that overall, the length of the evidence that they're going to present is going to be pretty similar. So I think it's going to be the same. The only, major differences I would see potentially is if Charlie was testifying, right? And depending on, which route he's going, but I think it's going to be right around the same amount of time. And I do think that's quick for this kind of case.
And then Nikki Cuds, my good friend, now that we met at a book signing from New Jersey, of all places. Does the panel think Donna is definitely going to take the stand? Jessica, do you think we're 100% for sure we have to see her because she has to basically defend the defense here?
100%. And any little tiny chance that they have, because I think what Megan said is true. I think that evidence, the wire, is so damning, but a clever attorney could explain it. I really believe that. I think it could happen. But then the other piece is the defendant. And I think the defendant is actually the biggest piece, right? In pretty much every case. There are cases, with easier charges where you can have a defendant not testify. And I've done that successfully many times, won the case, no problem. In a first-degree murder case, to not put the defendant on the stand is to say, I'm not putting the guilty person on the stand. Have a nice day, right? It's very, very hard for a jury to get on board with anything a lawyer's saying when the person isn't even getting up there. I know we have the constitutional rights. I talk about it all the time, but this is the reality, right? The reality. So yeah, she has to take the stand. And if she's perfect,
but I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, in many first-degree murder cases, the defendant does not take the stand, right? I mean, but here, you have no doubt.
The evidence is too strong, right? So it's not the kind of case where even a clever lawyer, like even the best of the best, I don't think could get a not guilty if she doesn't take the stand in this case, given the evidence that there is.
How would they explain it? How is anyone other than Donna going to explain what she actually meant by those communications? There are some cases where you don't need to explain it, right? Yeah. But in this case, it's like, who else other than her could possibly say what was actually, or what she intended to communicate, what she knew, what she didn't know? I mean, Oh, wow. I
Yeah.
can't imagine the prep that's going for
It-
her testimony.
Yeah, it's wild. I want to get right back into that. First, I want to address Hawad Asefi. Joel, you mentioned the Rashbaum interview earlier on. I thought you were a bit soft with him. You could have got him better, I thought, with the questions. What do you think about that? I love it. Give me your constructive criticism. I am always what's the word? Amicable. I have no hard feelings against Dan Rashbaum. But if you go back and watch the interview, I had, as they say in the biz, the videotape ready to go, the sound bites ready to go, and questioned him on pretty much everything across the board. I don't think he had a very fun time. You haven't seen him back since then, so I take that as a little badge of honor. But always happy to hear the constructive criticism. Here we go. Donna's trial. This was up already, right? COE, yeah. Courtroom 3B. I think it was the other one.
Mhm.
We're gonna get back to this, but just back to this whole
This is different.
what is this CO? Oh, hold on. This is different. This is notice of jury, non-jury trial. The above mentioned numbered case is hereby set September. Oh, so they've slightly revised the original, I think, date was going to be September, later in September. Then I think they said September 17th. Now we're at September 16th. And again, it says courtroom 3B here, but the COE spoke to the court today, spoke to an administrator at the court, and said that they just put it on the paperwork like this. But I wanted to get to jury selection, then we'll work our way backwards into what the defense is for Rashbaum, and I've got some questions for both of them on this. This is, by the way, the difference between 3B and 3G that we're talking about. The COE doing the work here. The gallery capacity for 3B, which is what Rashbaum wants, is only 21 people. The jury box on the right, used for short trials, older courtroom with older tech, similar room layout. As you see here, the big stat here is gallery capacity at 105. I can tell you, even for Charlie's trial, there were plenty of empty seats. If we go down to 21, it's going to be a problem for people like myself and others, Asian American Legal Focus, Mentor Lawyer, the others who are covering this case, and just anyone who wants to go watch. That's going to be a problem, no doubt. But back to this double extortion theory, Jessica. So basically, it's this cockamamie theory that the defense came up with, and all due respect to Dan, in the first trial with Charlie, saying, look, this Latin King guy, Luis Rivera, and the triggerman, Sigfredo Garcia, did this so they could extort money from Charlie Adelson, which to me makes just zero sense, because they're now taking out the one person that everyone wanted killed, and who Sigfredo and Luis would never even know about had it not been for all of this. So what is the defense strategy going to be here in terms of this double extortion theory? I mean, they've got to stick with it, but are they going to say Donna she just believed what Charlie said, so you don't have to believe the extortion theory? Does it get easier or harder in that sense?
I think it's easier, right? And that kind of comes into play, again, how Donna appears and the job she does on the stand and how good her lawyer is, because they really only have to show that she believed her son. And I think there's no question of the closeness of this relationship and the loyalty to one another, and the desire to help one another. I think that if Donna can show that she just simply believed Charlie and wanted to help Charlie, right, and was being loyal and supportive and asking no questions to do whatever Charlie needed to get out of this trouble that Charlie was in, I think it's easier for her. And I think too, it's a cockamamie thing, but I think actually in Charlie's trial, they were working with what they had, right? They had to kind of come up with something to defend him. And I think that based on what they were dealt, right, this was sort of pulling at straws. It was like the last thing they can do. The better thing about Donna is they don't have to prove that that's actually true. They just have to prove that that's what Charlie was saying and that Donna believed it.
I mean, the problem here, Megan, for me is this is a loving mother, and now the bump happens, and she's staying I mean, Dan Rashbaum is going to argue exactly what I'm about to say. She's kind of staying true to her, belief that Charlie's telling her the truth. But I
Sure.
think any rational person is going to say, why didn't you call the police? Why didn't you try to help your son? But it could go either way. What do you make of it?
I think you're right. I think Jessica's right. I think it's an easier case here in terms of, she was just influenced by Charlie, right? So I think that's and yes, they were working with what they had. So it seems ridiculous to the rest of us, but what do you do when you have bad facts, right? You've got all these bad facts and you have to make it work somehow. You have to offer some story in a defense. So that's the defense. And I think Donna's is easier. I think that people will likely see it as still unreasonable. I do think that people are going to say it still doesn't pass muster. However, all you need is one, right? One person to identify. And what if they get a perfect, jury selection is a great thing. What if they get a perfect juror who identifies with Donna, who is that mother? I mean, they're going to try to keep those jurors off, but what if they get someone who completely identifies with her, or one or two that kind of identify and can see that that's a possibility, and she's just a little bit sympathetic? So is it possible? Yeah. Do I think it's likely? No. But you know what? I've been surprised with criminal cases more than once in my 20 plus year career. So
Yeah, I mean, and that begs the question, Jessica. Again, let's hypothetically say you're defending Donna Adelson. Who is your ideal juror as the defense attorney for this trial? Do you want a grandmother who's got grandkids, whose own children have been divorced, who knows the pain of watching a child go through divorce? Who do you want there?
A fine line. So having just done a trial that involved like a domestic violence component, it's a really fine line, because there was a lot of people who, if they've been in that experience and they didn't have your reaction, they don't understand your reaction, right? So a lot of people who might seem similar to her, if they've had their children get divorced and they've dealt with custody battles, they could be thinking like, and I didn't kill anybody. Why did you kill these people, right?
Mhm.
So it's really a fine line, but I would certainly say we want sort of open-minded, sympathetic people in general, right? And there are a lot of people who are thinking like, okay, the state really has to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt, right? And these are the ideal jurors that it's very hard to find them. You don't know who they are. Actually, in my last trial, 3 jurors reached out to me after the trial, which was shocking, because again, you don't usually see that. And a lot of what they said surprised me.
Really?
It's, and the trial did go my way and everything was great, but a lot of what they said really surprised me. And actually
This is the murder trial you just, yeah.
Yes.
I'm just curious, do you have to report that to the court that the jurors are reaching out? No, you don't. Okay.
No, you don't. So you don't reach out to them.
Yeah.
But if they reach out to you, you can speak with them. And even once they reached out, I didn't push with questions. I sort of was like open-ended, like you're talking to me. What would you like to say to me, kind of thing. 2 of them waited for me at the courthouse,
Really?
right? For probably 2 hours until we came out. And then one called me afterwards.
What, I mean, can I ask you what surprised you the most about it? I mean, what were they offering up?
So the person that I thought of as my juror, right? The one I loved the most, the one I fought for, the one I thought that was fighting for me for the entire trial. Like there was no doubt. And it wasn't just me who thought that. My partner thought it. The family was watching. They thought it. Everybody believed it. She was the last holdout for the not guilty, right?
Really?
And yes. And it was just, I'm sharing it. It doesn't make me look good, but I'm sharing it because it's real and it's reality. And that's kind of what we all know in the business of what jurors are like, right? Like jurors are just wild cards. It's very hard to know what they're thinking. So it's hard to say, but I would look for generally sympathetic, open-minded mothers, absolutely, right? Or even fathers who seem particularly protective and close with their children, because I think that those are the most likely to not think it's okay that she killed someone, but to believe that she actually wasn't involved in the murder and that this whole double conspiracy thing, is what happened.
Yeah. Sort of from more criminology standpoint, Megan, what surprises you the most about jurors? Is it just their unpredictability?
Yes.
To
Oh my goodness. Yes. So I'm not trying to, swear I'm not trying to sell this podcast, but I'm just going to tell you in Direct Appeal season 2, we looked
watch
at,
Direct Appeal
sorry.
I
or
will.
listen to.
Thank you. Sorry. We looked at jurors from a case, and one of the jurors spoke with us, which was cool because we didn't have that experience in the first season. And what she told us, and she was shocked by the fact that, a juror came in one day and said, "Oh, I think I know what happened. I had a dream that, this defendant karate chopped his wife and this is what happened. And I'm pretty sure I feel confident about this," where it had nothing to do with the case. It had nothing to do with the facts. I mean, it was so hard to believe. And yet this juror we spoke with said this woman legitimately believed in his guilt because of this dream that she had nothing to do with the facts. So I think maybe that was one of the things that surprises me. You present the facts and you think you're presenting something like, here's what you should look at, but then there are so many other factors that are playing into, typically I think of the ones like, oh, what do they like the defense attorney? Do they like the defendant? Do they smile or, these things? But you just have no idea. They're all wild cards. We're all people and we bring with it us rationalities and irrationalities. So I think there's a lot of surprises.
Uh, Lucidora, I can never say her name, but she wrote in the comment section, Joel's getting nervous. He likes to be in control. This is true. But I will not kill anyone over it. When Donna is arrested, shockingly, Jessica, a police officer removes her blue travel bag off her shoulder and gives it immediately over to Harvey. Potential vital evidence now gone. Just walk us through that. I mean, there is this arrest video, Jessica, and you do see Harvey walking away with his bag. I know they executed search warrants like after the fact, and they got stuff. Including devices. They may have gotten some of the devices that night, like cell phones and iPads. But what about this travel bag? Would they have got it after executing a search warrant the day after or the day after that, perhaps?
So if it's there, right? If it's there and if they're thinking. So I would imagine if they're executing a search warrant, they're thinking that they're looking through everything that they can, or that they would maybe even look specifically for that because she had it with her, right? But it really just depends. I mean, if it's there, I think they would have gotten it. I think it looks to me like they got rid of it, right? And I think that's what most people would be thinking.
How about this from Sherry Douglas, also here all the time? Although I think it would never happen. Best guess at what sentence could Donna get if she admitted guilt and took some sort of plea? Jessica, like in terms of, because now, there's jailhouse calls between Charlie and Donna after he was arrested. Thank you, Black Widow from the Republic of Ireland, gifting 5 memberships. There's conversations back and forth, and I think it's safe to say Donna is not happy with Wendy. Charlie's definitely not happy with Wendy. Wendy is reportedly taken off to Austin, Texas. It's a whole mess. It's an enmeshed family, which I'm going to ask Megan about in a second. But what is a likely scenario in terms of a plea deal here? Is it Charlie flipping, Donna flipping on Wendy? What do you see?
It's tough. I think that the best chance they have is for all of them to cooperate, right? It's a deal for all of them. They're not co-defendants because Wendy hasn't been charged, but they're theoretically co-defendants, right? And I think that the best they would do is if they all agree to take responsibility for what they've done. Now, if Wendy's going to take zero responsibility because that just looks to be her style, then that's going to leave more for her brother and her mother. Her mother is in her 70s, right? How much time she has left is really questionable. So it would be hard to imagine her not living the rest of her life in prison at this point, because even a deal, right? It's hard to imagine them giving her a deal where they say, oh, you can just have probation, right? It's hard to imagine that. So if they were going to give her any significant amount of time, that really gives her like very little time in her life Charlie is the one who's going to take the biggest hit, right? And he right now has a life sentence, so he also has motivation to take the biggest hit because anything is better than life, right? And he's a fairly young man.
Yeah, fairly young. Susanna Madingu, who I met at CrimeCon and is an attorney, which is why she has Esquire after her name. Just right back to Jessica on this. I respectfully disagree. Charlie did not make up that's extortion, Susanna. I know you didn't write this, you wrote distortion. Charlie did not make up the extortion theory until 6 years later. So if she says there was an extortion theory, you have to believe Charlie said it 6 years ago too. I mean, that's an interesting point, I guess. I don't know if I fully buy it. Jessica, your take on this comment.
So I don't know if I agree, right? So we don't have to say that Charlie told her this 6 years ago. It could be that Charlie gave her very little information, right? And she, as a mother, all she knew was that this is what she needed to do to protect her son, that there was something bad going on against him, right?
Jessica, hang on one sec, because there's more here. She's dropping money, Susanna, on this to get her point across. Charlie did not know he needed a double extortion theory until he knew of the wiretaps. It's tailor-made to address those. It makes no sense without the wiretaps. That part I for sure buy. If the jury does not believe Charlie, they can't believe he made it up 6 years ago. No one gets this. I'm a little slow, but I sort of get what she's saying.
I think I get what she's saying, right? And what she's saying makes sense. What she's saying is like, this is total BS, right? This is something made up 6 years later, and it is tailor-made for these wiretaps. I think that makes sense 100%, right? Yeah. But even given that, and I'm not saying people are going to believe Donna. I don't believe her, right? But what I'm saying is that she doesn't have to prove like this is the truth. There was this double conspiracy and Charlie told me about it all these years ago. She just has to prove that she at least knew that Charlie was in some kind of trouble and that she was willing to do whatever it took to help him get out of that trouble.
Right.
Just back to like kind of the criminology and profiling aspect of this, Megan. The role of family dynamics within the Adelson family. I mean, it is such a crazily enmeshed family, with the exception of Rob, who distanced himself. What's the challenge in your estimation from either the state and or defense about how to explain how they were either all tied together, which is what the state's going to do, or the defense might say, look, just because the son had this idea doesn't mean that the mother had the idea, but at some point, we're going to see the weird dynamic between this family, correct?
I mean, the state has the communications. They're showing the dynamic. You know, they can literally show you the type of loyalty that this family had to each other. It's very interesting about a family dynamic because they are fiercely loyal. So when you ask who will crack, if anyone, hard to say. I can tell you, I don't think it's going to be Wendy for sure. I agree with Jessica. But they have this type of loyalty. They're going to do what it takes to protect each other. Now, I've seen plenty of cases where family members knew of another family member's intention to commit a crime. They may not have necessarily called the authorities right away or, rang a bell, whatever, but they didn't participate and they distanced themselves because there's usually one in a type of family that has a more of a conscience or has, a differing feeling. So it's usually not this type of such a tight-knit kind of collusion. That's rare. It's definitely a rarity. We don't usually see family crimes unless we're talking about organized crime. But even in organized crime, people crack modern day a lot sooner than this family will crack. So I think it's a great question, by the way, that you asked, like, who, if anyone, is going to crack? And the question you asked about what kind of deal Donna would get, does it matter other than short of her getting, in all seriousness, short of her getting 5 years or less in prison? Would any other deal matter because of her age? Like, why? There's no incentive for her to take any other deal other than just a couple of years. And I mean, in all seriousness, I'm sure that would be offensive to a lot of people. But is that out of the realm to get her to admit the whole thing, tell the truth, and take, total transparency, which I think is part of what the Markel family would want. I've spoken with Ruth before, just to find some sense of justice and know the truth. I don't think it's totally off the table, but she has no incentive to take anything other than a deal that is very, very small in prison time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the only scenario I can see is her throwing her daughter completely under the bus, which I don't think is going to happen.
I don't think so.
This question here is interesting from Sin City. What if Charlie took the stand, Jessica, and said it was him and he had nothing to do with it, and Donna had no knowledge? I highly doubt he's going to do that, even for his mother. But what then? I mean, what if he gets up there and just unequivocally says, it was all me? He's convicted. He has nothing to lose. Do the jurors understand that?
I don't think it would work unless he takes his sister down. Honestly, I don't think it's enough, because I think it's pretty obvious why he's doing it. He has a life sentence. He's going nowhere. Let me save my mother. But I think, without that story, right, that the Markels want, they want to just know, right? Like, what really happened here, because it's so outrageous, right? It's so outrageous. What really happened here? And I just wanted to say something about what you guys were saying before. I think Wendy's the weakest link. And I think if they would have started by putting her in jail, she would have flipped on her family members real quick, right? And we would be in a different position right now.
That's super interesting. I mean, now that you brought up her name, what's your prediction for her? Some people, there's talk around Tallahassee right now that she is next. That's been going around. There's been rumblings of that, but it's kind of piped up in recent days. Let's put it that way. Do you think she's next, Jessica?
She should be, right? But she should have been first, right? And this should have been so long ago. So whether or not it's actually coming now is hard to say. I think that it's interesting that she testifies in these trials, right? Like, immunity is kind of silly when you could be charged yourself with murder, right? Immunity for merely just what you're saying there, right? She's not believable at all, right? It's like just a few minutes with her, and that's how they're all lying. It's a few minutes with her, right? A few minutes with her, and it's all a lie. Right. So is she next? I would say, I hope so. Right. I would say.
Yeah. This is interesting. You're the first person I've heard, and I've had a lot of guests on, say that Wendy should have been first. I mean, the kind of the rub against that has always been that the strongest evidence, is obviously the hitmen, Katie, then Charlie, that the weakest, perhaps maybe next to Harvey, is Wendy. So just in terms of that, in terms of the evidentiary value, you still think she should have gone first, that they should have tried?
No, I agree with you. I agree with you that the evidence against her is the weakest, but I think she's the weakest link. So I think that if she was in jail, right, which unfortunately, as a criminal defense attorney, I see this all the time. People with very little evidence against them are sitting in jail rotting for years, right? She wouldn't be rotting for years. She would be taking a deal and everybody would have went down.
Interesting. I never saw it that way. Carm is in the chat. What's up, Mom? Teresa, Luck of the Irish, became a YouTube member. A couple more questions, and then we'll get some final thoughts. But told you we were going to do just fine without Judge Jay Blitzman, the elder statesman of STS. Although I have a lot of questions for him, and hopefully he's going to come on tomorrow so we get judge questions in. We're always getting the lawyer, the state, the defense, the criminologist, but we rarely get the judge's perspective. So we'll do that tomorrow. But Megan, to you, and Carm jokes she's a lot like Donna minus the murder. We've heard that many times. How does she, Donna, this is not my mom, how does she fit or diverge from a typical person who orchestrates a murder for hire plot? She seems like the last, just from exterior looks alone, you think she'd be the last person. So who are these people that, plot these murder for hires?
Well, I love that she has the typical person who does this, because it's not typical. Obviously, it's pretty atypical for any person and a female. But she fits with female offenders in terms of female offenders who plot murders, who commit murder, usually do it for utilitarian purposes. When you compare them with males will not often murder for utilitarian They have, power, control, other types of issues, but females usually have a purpose, whether it's for money. There's a goal, there's an end game. So in that way, I think she fits the mold, right? So I think she also fits the mold in terms of she definitely has some antisocial traits. And you see, again, there is just, she doesn't have, what I see, any real empathy or any sympathy for the Markels and for what she took from them. And females who perpetrate these types of crimes, that is unfortunately usually typical. Although you will see a lot of those females later on apologizing, whether it's fake tears, fake remorse, fake whatever, they just feel bad. I will say that Donna is a little bit more stoic, probably a little more indignant. And I think she'll remain that way till unfortunately, the bitter end, where I have to imagine, and I would not speak on behalf of the Markels, but I have to imagine, like, hearing someone say, especially one of the real orchestrators, that they are so sorry and they've realized what they've actually took from them would go infinitely further than even maybe the punishment itself. But I just don't think that's going to happen, unfortunately.
By the way, Carm just made herself one of the most hated women in America by saying, "What do they have on Wendy Adelson?" In the chat. And I'm going to ask Jessica about that in a moment, but I'm going to forget. So I'm going to take a note on that and go to this question from Bill Davis. This is an interesting question, Megan. This is your world here. Are the Adelsons really loyal to each other, or are they so fully invested in this sick idea that no one beats the Adelsons?
It's both. It's definitely both. I definitely see all types of negative traits where, for sure. And I can't speak for Harvey, to be honest. I don't necessarily think he fits as well in with the other three, to be perfectly frank. But I can't say that definitively. But yeah, for sure. They think they are above this. Again, a sense of entitlement, a sense of winning, a sense of they're more powerful, they're more deserving. How could they be beat? So yeah, I think that plays a huge role in it. So there's loyalty to each other, but yeah, that's a great observation. 100% agree.
Yeah, and I agree with that. A really good point from Bill Davis.
Yeah.
Ida Shaw, JD, we should not underestimate Wendy. She's very clever, no bigger manipulator. It's my belief, and this is just me talking, that she was the one manipulating the whole family to get this done. She couldn't take it anymore. She's talking to her mom, and the mom finally acted with the help of Charlie. In terms of evidence, there's not a ton of, almost no direct evidence. I don't know if there's any, but it's circumstantial, Jessica. But it's hard to get by the fact that she drives by the house right after the murder when it's completely out of the way. Is that alone enough to get a juror's attention and convict, or does there just have to be much more meat on the bone?
So I think the case against her is circumstantial, of course, right? And I agreed with you, absolutely, with both of you, that the evidence against her is the weakest, right? And I understand that's why law enforcement started with the others. That's why the state started with the others. But she is, while there might not be the hard evidence against her, she's the most obviously guilty, right? Anyone who's looking at this is saying that she was the one who wanted this. She was the one who planned this, right? And I think that drive-by speaks volumes, right? Just in the business, we always say, like, they always go back. And for some reason, the perpetrators go to the crime scenes. It's the weirdest, craziest thing. Maybe Megan can tell us psychologically why they do this weird, bad thing, but they do. And the fact that she did it, and her kind of her cold explanation of sort of like, oh, well, I was just, going to go somewhere, and then I turned there, but there was a block and I saw a police officer vehicle, so I left, right? So the father of her two small children is there. It's just, it's a terrifying thing, right? I have two little boys myself, and what the Markels are saying, what was done to them. What about what was done to the children, right? What about what was done to them?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Something horrible was done to them.
1,000%. Carm chiming back in saying, "What? I can't ask a question?" That was her. Well, it's different. She says right here, Asking a question is a sin? Joel, asking a question is
No,
a sin? No, it is not a sin, but you didn't really phrase it. But this is why she's a survivor. In real time, she kind of switches the context of her query up to make it more of a question. But yeah, it's a lot of circumstantial evidence, Carm, but I guess they could piece the pieces together here.
Sorry, Joel, isn't the hardest part about that is the question, wait, so you saw all these police officers and, evidence that a crime has happened and you weren't concerned about your family, your children?
Yeah.
It's not a good look. So,
No, I
It's
mean,
not a good look.
it's crazy. I mean, I always say this, like in TV, the littlest mistakes are the biggest. I've said this a million times. If you're
yeah.
interviewing President Biden and you spell his name with 3 N's at the end, no one's listening to your interview. It's if you hit the N key too long.
Right.
Same thing in a trial. It's the littlest thing that I think. Am I wrong about this, Jessica? But can small things be huge things in a trial? Like someone might just not get past the fact that, look, she drove by this house. How would she have known? Why didn't she ask about her kids? None of this makes sense. She's guilty. Is that enough potentially?
So it shouldn't be, right? Let we say
Mhm.
like they should be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, but I agree
Yes.
with Megan 100%. It is not a good look. It's a horrible look. It's an ugly look that she did that. And it's very ugly how she explains it in that cold way and sort of minutes away from when she snidely was like, the state's not going to decide to charge me, right?
Mhm.
Like she's untouchable. Like there's no feeling at all that her children lost their father. And here's the reality. The reality is her mother and her brother would not have done this if she didn't want it, right? If you're looking at the rest of the evidence the way it is and the loyalty and the love and the closeness, they did it for her, right? They wouldn't have done it if she didn't want it. They did it for her. And that's sort of not evidence, right? But that's the underlying piece. Like she's what's holding everything together. She's the thread that holds all the different parts together.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Jopo here, driving past the house definitely shows knowledge, but does it show participation? I mean, strictly from a legal perspective here, Jessica, what would it mean if Wendy was on trial and this came up? What does it mean legally if she knows about it, but she didn't participate in it?
So I think if she knew but didn't participate, whether we all agree with this morally or ethically or not, I think legally she's not guilty, right? Legally, if she didn't do anything, but I think that jurors would be thinking, what are the chances of that? So she knew, and also I think they would convict her because they would be so mad, right? If she got up and was like, well, I knew they were doing this and I just didn't participate and stood back and watched it happen, I don't think jurors would be okay with that at all.
There was a bunch of motions filed, and I'm looking for the legal language, which of course I can't find, but essentially Dan Rashbaum said, you just took too long to indict my client. I forget the legal, verbiage is for it, but that's what Dan said. Look, you took 10 years to do this. And this ties into this comment because there's a text. I'm outside to Charlie. Isn't that strong evidence during the money drop after the murder was done for the hitman? Allegedly, Donna Adelson's outside. Dan Rashbaum says definitively that she was not there, that she was traveling. And he says, look, I'd be able to pull the SunPass records, but so much time has passed that I can't do it. So what about this notion of something like this coming into evidence? I mean, how does a judge weigh this sort of thing in terms of evidentiary value, Jessica?
It's kind of a hard thing to say because I agree with them, right? I actually think that that's a very legally sound argument, right? I mean, you took so long to charge. We have no way now to obtain something that could be exonerating. It no longer exists. So you shouldn't be able to use this evidence. It's completely unfair. I think it's a great argument. I think it's something that the judge should consider. Now, just because they should consider it doesn't mean they're going to rule in that favor, but they do have the ability to make that argument to the jury as well. So if the evidence does come in, they can say, oh, this is convenient. We come 6 years later saying this, when meanwhile, that deprived us of the opportunity to show you what really happened, and here's what really happened. The problem is they don't have a lot of credibility on their case, right? So they're not going to be believed.
COE, can we take care of this? It's bad optics here. Give your mom a membership, Joel. If I knew how to even get a membership, I would, but a couple years into this, I have no idea. But we'll get Karma membership so I don't get yelled at by everybody. Agree, Joel. Wendy was the master manipulator. Final question for Megan, then we'll get final thoughts. Just it has to do with the court of Abby, we were talking about this. The latest paperwork shows 3B. Really surprised to see that before the motion is heard. Have you heard anything, Joel? We spoke to the court today. The COE spoke to an administrator in the court. This was not ruled on. The motion was not ruled on. They just automatically default to courtroom B for these cases. You're looking at that here on the first line that is underlined there. Courtroom 3B. That does not mean, as far as we know, that the trial will be in 3B, which, by the way, seats 21 people, the COE found out, as opposed to 3G, which seats over, what was it, COE? I'm looking here, 100 and something. I know that. So big difference there between the courtrooms. But Megan Sachs, court of public opinion. I mean, it's 121 in the gallery for 3B as opposed to 105 for 3G. A huge difference if the public wants to go. And I know personally a bunch of people that are heading to the trial, you're not going to be able to get in if it's 21 people. The Markels alone are 3 people right there, and they've got to be in, let alone Donna's family, whoever else, and then everyone else is going to be watching it, I guess, in an overflow room. But we could, I guess, laugh and hang out and talk to each other. But court of public opinion, Megan Sachs, how critical is it to a case that's this high profile? I mean, everyone's talking about it. The Datelines, the 2020s, the Wondery Over My Dead Body, the Surviving the Survivors, the others. How does this factor in to the trial itself?
Totally depends on the jurors, if they're being honest about their influence or not. So how influenced were they? What do they really know? And can anyone really be impartial? No. I mean, it's very hard to be completely impartial and not be influenced by what you've heard, read, spoken to a friend about, seen from your favorite podcaster, Surviving the Survivor, So I think the truth is it really depends on how influenced the jury members actually are, how, what they know and what they don't really know. Because if they have heard, if they've been exposed, but they just think they can be impartial, we all like to think that. I'd like to think that as well, but I know that's not the reality and how our processes work. So it could be huge, or depending on how kind of people are not exposed to this. And I think it was Daryl Cohen, who said he doesn't think a lot of people know about it, which surprised me. But because
and then some people in Tallahassee. Yeah,
I think locals do know, to be honest. But it depends on what the exposure level is like.
Yeah, by the way, this is another document that the COE pulled, just showing that Donna Adelson right there has been asking for court documents that she is paying for in the amount of $134. So she's busy too, getting ready. And I know one of the challenges is Dan Rashbaum is down here and she's up there. He's down in Miami where I am. So it's, it's a logistical problem. Yeah. As well. I mean, Jessica, what about that? I mean, logistically speaking, and then I promise we'll get final thoughts. Dan is in Miami. You're up in Boca. I mean, she's all the way up in Tallahassee. It makes it tougher, right? I mean, there is Alex Morris also representing her up in Tallahassee. But how often, prior to your case just now, how often were you visiting the defendant or your client?
So in that case, my client was out of custody, thankfully, and we would see each other regularly. And I prepared the case for 5 years. I represented her for 5 years. I got her out of custody, right after she was arrested. So we would see each other pretty often, and we would also talk. In jail, when I have clients, and I have clients in jail now, we can set up like confidential FaceTime visits in the Miami jails. And that's what I do with clients that I have in Miami. I'm not sure what they have available to them in Tallahassee, but there should certainly be availability for confidential communication, whether it's FaceTime or whether it's over the phone. And I'm assuming they're relying a lot on that, because even if they were local to her, they can't sit in the jail all day. There's so much to be done to prepare for this kind of case. Even if they have a team, they're not going to be able to do that.
Huge thanks to both of these guests. Megan Sachs, she's a full professor of criminology and the graduate program director at Fairleigh Dickinson University. She teaches classes including women in crime, perfect for this, serial killers and crime policy. Would you ever look at Megan Sachs in the supermarket and think that that's what she specializes in? No, you would not. You would think that she's, I don't know. You think, I don't know.
I would.
What
I can see it.
You can? Yeah. Well, I don't know. There you go.
I'm like, thank you, Jess. That might not have been a compliment, but I thought it was.
It is one. Yeah.
The testimony regarding the jail calls, I can't wait. That'll be interesting. Megan and Amy, her cohort at Fairleigh Dickinson, they host 2 different podcasts. Check them out. Women in Crime and Direct Appeal. There you go. Megan, are they going to nail Wendy after this, and your final thoughts?
Yeah, I think if Donna's found guilty, and I do believe she will be, I think, yes, Wendy is next. I do. But I will just put a caveat and say I think Wendy will be the most challenging case to try for the prosecution.
I think I would have to agree with that. Interesting. There have been cases where people are arrested right after they get off a witness stand. That would be wild. That would certainly make the stay in tally be quite interesting. Shout out to my man, Wesley John Holmes, an Aussie living in Tokyo. How cool is that?
Oh, very.
My sister's in Tokyo right now, and they were trying to go somewhere, Wesley John Holmes, at Kyoto, but there's some sort of typhoon going on, so make sure she's all right. Jessica Mishali, she is an attorney out of Boca Raton, Florida. She was helping the indigent and then took over a family practice from former state rep in Florida, Stephen J. Press. What's Stephen J. Press doing now that you took over his firm?
He's retired. Yeah. We worked together, and then he retired and I took over the practice.
Since I envy retirement, what does he do all day while he's retired? I would like to know. Does he go out on a boat?
Golf. He plays golf. He goes to Israel on a lot of trips. And he just sort of enjoys life.
Nice.
This is fascinating. I was going to make a joke, but it's too inappropriate, and Carmen will scream at me. Yeah, it's too inappropriate. Carmen will scream at me, but she kind of knows where I'm going here. I'll explain it another day. But huge thanks to both of you. What about Wendy? Did you just say? Is she? What do you think?
She's next. She's next. They're coming for you, Wendy. Look out.
There you go. Well, Jessica will certainly be back on, as will Megan. Tomorrow night we're doing this again. Tuesday, that is tomorrow night, and then rest of the week we are doing Corey Richins. She was in court today. I had no idea what was going on because I was running around doing a lot of stuff. There's Dan Markel with his mom Ruth. Phil Markel, who I've really come to know very well, is a great guy. I don't see Shelly up there, but there's Dan with his 2 kids. Wednesday, we're going to be looking at Corey Richins. She's accused of poisoning her husband 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl. Thursday night, back on to Barry Morphew. A lot of people think he killed his wife, Suzanne Morphew. And there's also news in the Maddie Soto case, which is very depressing. She's a little young girl who was murdered by the wife's boyfriend, allegedly. And there are now text messages being revealed in that case. So we will stay on all that for you. That is what is ahead. Lindsay Shea says it best. Justice for Dan Markel. See you tomorrow night. Love you, America. Love you, Boca. Love you. Where are you? Are you New Jersey, Megan?
No, I'm in Pennsylvania now. I was a Jersey girl for a while, but you know.
Oh, wow.
Love you, Pennsylvania, home of Brian Koberger. That's good.
I know.
And of course, Tallahassee, Justice for Dan Markel. Guest, stick around 1 second.